Who is right? Dave Ramsey with his 8% rule, or the rule that's been used for decades, the 4% rule. What I did is took Dave's numbers, starting out with $1 million and withdrawing 8% a year, giving yourself a 4% COLA, and I ran these numbers for every single year from 1923 on. We found out that 35 times using these numbers in the last 100 years, you would have run out of money. Some years, 36 times in the last 100 years, you would have had over $1 million left. You can see that going down through in the 20-year column. Also the 30 years over here, but let's just keep looking at the 20-year. 26 times you would have had over $3 million. What is going on here? Why is there such a discrepancy? Why does it look like in 1929 you'd run out of money in just 5 years? What in the world's going on? And some people say, well, if you're running out of money, you wouldn't continue taking out as much. Okay, if you're planning on taking out that 8%, $67.50, let's just cut that by 5% each year. How long would you be able to survive if you were planning on $67.50 for your expenses, and after 10 years you were down to $4,200 just to try to make ends meet, and by the time 13 years, because you had this down stretch here, you'd be down to $3,647, almost half of what you started with. So while your values are going up, inflation's happening, you're cutting what you're getting by 5% a year. Let me show you how these numbers actually work out. Again, these were Dave's numbers, running at taking out 8% and using them 4% COLA. Here's what's actually going on. I want you to see his numbers here. In 1929, in the first 4 years, Dave's running it at 12%. Okay, after 4 years, running at 12%, taking out 8% and inflating it by the number by 4%, you should have 1.164 million because you have 12, and you're only taking out 8, even though you're inflating that 67.50 by 4%. What happens if we change that 12%? Remember, that's an average return. But those first 4 years, it was actually down 21%. Watch what happens. Down 21%. Oh, all of a sudden, Dave's got you running out of money also. What is going on here? That you have to look at those initial years. You can't just run it at 12%. Even though, look at this. The average for 1929, if you were in it for 30 years, you'd be getting 11.48. So let's just use 11.48. That's the average return for over 30 years. But what happens? 11.48 after 4 or 5 years, you should have 1.174 million. After 30, it should be 1.352 million. But what happens if you do it for these first, 12 years, 13 years? You're averaging 1.82. You end up getting 11.48, but you're getting 1.82 for those 4 years. Let me type in 1.82 because that's what you actually did in 1929. All of a sudden, you're running out of money in 12 years or something? That's why you can't just look at average returns. Now, let's go back to this page. 1929 was strange. Yes, but all these other years we run it, you're also going to run out of money. But a lot of times you're not. A lot of times you're going to come out really well. But you can't use 20 or average returns at 12%. Even though in this case we saw in 1929 it was 11.48. We could pick any numbers here. 1925, 13.19. And yet you still run out of money running the numbers from 1925 because, let's run these numbers. All the average there is 8.56. Over here at 8.56. You're running out of money in 19 years. That's the way it works. You can't look at just putting 12 in there because those first years, if they're down years, they can really knock you down in a hurry. And that's what's happening when all these reds, those initial years, again, it depends on what's happening in those initial years. Let's pick another year. Let's pick 1973. Let's pick 1999. That's a more recent one. 1999. Look at this. You're running out of money. Actually, 2000. I'm not even going to. The worst case scenario, you're running out of money in 8 years or something like that. Let's look at the numbers. Again, Dave Ramsey running the numbers for 1999. He's running it at 12%. He's running it over here at 12%. After 5 years, yes, at 1.209. What happens if we average these out right here? Down 14%. Down 14% that first 3 years. Down 14.36, I think it was. Out of money. Let's continue on. Let's look at the average for these first 8 years, 9 years. Down 1.59. 1.59. Still running out of money. See, if those first years are down years and there's a string of them, you don't have time for it to come back. If you're doing the 8% rule, in other videos we've shown that the 4% rule will last every single time. But he was recommending 4% and not understanding why in the world anybody would ever say you'd run out of money. He just kept running it at 12%, even though in this case, this 20-year average, because it hasn't been 30 years, you're getting 7.68, but you don't have time for the market to even come back to the 7.68. The 10-year average is 1.21, but we saw these first 9 years was actually negative 1.59, and that's why we ran into the problems that we ran into right there, and you're running out of money. That's why you can't just look at average returns, because in Dave's world, this should have just been 12%, and you would have all kinds of money, 1.2. Instead, you're running out of money by right down here. That's why you can't just look at average returns. Yes, many times you're going to be in fine shape. 29 times you have over 2 million. 26 times you have over 3 million. 14 times. But the concern is we don't know when these negative years are going to happen. And if they happen when you first retire, which happened like in the year 2000 or 1929, who knows what the next 10, 20 years are going to be. If we start out with a string like this, you're going to be out of money because you can't use average returns. Hopefully this makes sense to you. I'm going to continue running some of these numbers just because this has caused such a debate, 8% or 4%. Hopefully we're showing you that you can't just go by average returns. Consider subscribing to this channel. Tell your friends about these. They need to know these numbers. Don't go by average returns. Our channel is $1 Million Made Easy. Please consider subscribing and tell your friends about this. Thanks for watching.